is the statue of Lot's wife.
Archaeological evidence pointing to the Bible once again, and the reaction has been explosive. In a remote region near the Dead Sea, a discovery hidden for thousands of years has resurfaced, drawing intense attention from scientists, historians, and theologians around the world. The footage alone has left many stunned, spreading rapidly across the internet as experts race to explain what they're seeing.
But there might be something in that metaphor that could tell us more about the catastrophe itself.
And experts are scrambling to explain what many believe confirms one of the Bible's most haunting stories. What was once dismissed as myth may now be standing tall in salt, staring straight into history. The forgotten city beneath the salt. Long before archaeologists brought cameras and excavation tools into the desert, the story of Lot's wife had already carved its way into human imagination. A woman fleeing a city on fire, warned not to look back, does exactly that and is frozen in time, transformed, according to Scripture, into a pillar of salt. For centuries, people assumed it was symbolic, a moral tale to caution against longing for a sinful past. But what if it wasn't just symbolism? What if something physically remained? The cities of Sodom and Gomorrah were said to be so wicked that divine fire was their only cure. Ancient texts describe a sudden catastrophe, one so intense that it erased entire populations overnight. Smoke rising, land collapsing, and ash covering what used to be homes. It all sounds mythical, but the curious thing is, people have been searching for these lost cities since antiquity. Roman writers, Islamic geographers, and even 19th-century Christian explorers all believed they could find remnants of this biblical disaster somewhere near the Dead Sea. And it makes sense. The region is one of the most geologically unique areas on Earth. It sits in a deep rift. The air is thick with minerals, and the land itself seems scorched and sunken. Near the southern basin, there's an eerie silence, broken only by wind rustling through crumbling cliffs made of salt and stone. Here, strange formations appear on the horizon, including a massive salt mountain known as Mount Sodom. Its name alone carries centuries of speculation. But it's what lies within and around that mountain that has attracted renewed interest. Not long ago, a new generation of researchers returned to this ancient terrain, not as religious pilgrims, but as forensic scientists, geologists, and archaeologists. Their goal wasn't to confirm miracles, but to trace seismic activity, test mineral layers, and model ancient climates. Still, even they couldn't ignore the stories. And as their instruments probed deeper into the earth, something began to surface. Evidence of extreme heat in the soil layers, the presence of naturally occurring sulfur balls, and a pattern of destruction unlike anything explained by natural erosion alone. There were even strange voids beneath the surface, air pockets where it looked like the ground had collapsed rapidly, perhaps violently. The researchers found burned sediment layers interspersed with unburned ones, suggesting a rapid and chaotic event rather than a slow geological shift. Even the air, they reported, felt denser, heavier, as if it carried the weight of history. Still, no one was talking about Lot's wife yet. The idea of finding her, or any human trace tied directly to the story, seemed laughable to the scientific community. What could possibly survive thousands of years in such conditions, especially in salt, which corrodes and crumbles? But others, particularly those watching from religious and historical circles, weren't so quick to dismiss it. They had seen strange things in this desert before, and the truth is, many of the most significant biblical sites once dismissed as myths have been gradually corroborated by archaeology. Jericho, Hazor, Nineveh, all cities mentioned in Scripture, unearthed one by one. So now the focus shifted to the least understood of them all, Sodom, or what might remain of it, buried under a crust of minerals and layers of silence. No one could say for sure where the city once stood, but Mount Sodom had become the center of attention for reasons beyond its name, because something had been found there. And this time, it wasn't just another salt pillar. It was something else entirely. Something shaped like a person. Something preserved more perfectly than anyone thought possible. But before we reveal what they saw when they cut through that surface, we have to understand why they went looking in the first place. Because what they found, well, it would soon make headlines around the world. Mount Sodom, nature's time capsule. Mount Sodom rises from the empty landscape like something erased by time. To an untrained eye, it resembles any worn cliff lining the Dead Sea's shore. But geologists understand more. This isn't ordinary stone, it's salt, endless layers of it. A mountain built almost entirely of halite, shaped over ages by evaporated seawater and immense tectonic pressure. The land beneath is fragile, riddled with sinkholes and cracks. Each year, the mountain shifts, breaks apart, and reforms itself, as if concealing or exposing fragments of a story unwilling to disappear. The Dead Sea region is already among the most unusual places on Earth. It rests at the planet's lowest land elevation, over 430 meters below sea level, and its hypersaline waters make survival nearly impossible. But what lies beneath the salty crust is even stranger. Underground, pockets of natural asphalt, gases, and minerals are fused together by ancient volcanic activity. It's a place where destruction feels woven into nature's rhythm. This harsh environment also creates an eerie kind of preservation. Organic material can be locked in by salt and ash, effectively paused in time. That was what brought the team back to Mount Sodom. They weren't the first explorers, but they carried technology never used there before. Thermal imaging, subsurface scanners, and high-resolution drone mapping let them examine beneath the surface without disturbing the delicate ground. Initially, the findings were expected: cracks, salt caverns, collapsed voids. Then one image stopped everyone. It revealed a vertical shaft, thin and deep, with a strange density pattern at its center. It didn't resemble surrounding salt structures. It was denser, more compact, and oddly formed, almost human-shaped. They guided a drone closer and recorded footage of a jagged salt pillar rising from a ridge's edge. Unlike erosion-shaped columns nearby, this one seemed intentional. Its base was fused into rock, and its shape, though eroded, showed proportions too balanced to dismiss. Arms drawn forward, a rough outline of a head. From certain angles, it appeared like someone frozen mid-step. The location was flagged for closer study. What followed was careful excavation. The ground couldn't support heavy machinery, so the work was done by hand. Layer after layer, loose salt was brushed away, with moisture and vibration kept extremely low. One researcher called the process terrifyingly fragile. One wrong action could bring everything down. But what emerged wasn't just another salt pillar. Inside were darker mineral veins and a fibrous substance unlike any natural salt formation. Early analysis suggested ancient textile material sealed within mineral layers over time. For days, the team worked almost silently, watching something slowly emerge from salt that had concealed it for centuries. Officially, no claims were made yet. But off-camera, whispers began. Lot's wife. The one who looked back. The one turned to salt. They were facing something that, if confirmed, could be the oldest preserved human form in the region. And unlike skeletons in caves or mummies wrapped in cloth, this wasn't prepared or honored. This was sudden, sealed in a moment, as if a story had been stopped mid-sentence and trapped inside a mineral shell. No one truly knew what stood before them yet, but rumors were already spreading. Footage leaked to a journalist in Tel Aviv. From there, it reached a small biblical archaeology forum. By week's end, international media had taken notice. Everyone asked the same question. Had they found her? The woman from Genesis, punished for a single look. The desert had guarded its secrets long enough, and now one seemed ready to emerge into the light. The signs hiding out in the open. For decades, the land around the Dead Sea has murmured about what lies beneath, remains burned by ages past, ground twisted by destruction, and tales handed down through families that were never fully proven. Many brush off the biblical story of Sodom and Gomorrah as symbolism, too extreme to have truly happened. Yet the landscape speaks another truth if you learn how to listen. And over time, a small group of determined researchers started piecing together evidence others overlooked. It began with old charts and journey records. Roman mapmakers labeled the southern Dead Sea basin as forbidden, warning of toxic vapors and sunken ground. Later, Islamic writers spoke of settlements reduced to dust, near a salt mountain where life refused to survive and creatures stayed away. Jewish tradition pointed to a precise location near the Lisan Peninsula as the place of ruin. Each account, though incomplete, kept pointing back to the same region. And inside that region stood Mount Sodom, untouched and unquestioned across the centuries. What captured scientists' interest wasn't only what the mountain was made of, but what surrounded it. The soil contained sulfur chunks as large as golf balls, which geologists say only form under extreme heat and force. Tests taken just below the surface showed scorched layers and fused minerals, evidence of temperatures hot enough to liquefy stone. Yet there was no volcanic trace, no sign of human fire, only damage so precise and rapid it felt almost deliberate. These findings drew the focus of a university archaeology team quietly supported by a private history group. They weren't chasing myths. They wanted measurable proof. But the more they explored, in the ground and in records, the thinner the boundary between legend and fact became. A forgotten manuscript appeared in an Italian museum archive, telling of a solitary figure on a ridge near the ruined city, a salt statue shaped like a grieving woman. It was dismissed until the team realized the description aligned exactly with the formation they were uncovering. They reviewed satellite imagery spanning 2 decades. The pillar's shape had barely shifted, suggesting it had remained stable for hundreds of years, preserved by dry air and hardened minerals. Still, no one had analyzed it in detail. It had always been grouped with other salt figures, natural erosion forms scattered across the mountain. But this one stood apart. Its shape wasn't accidental. Its density differed from the rest, and inside were irregularities no geologist could easily dismiss. Additional scans exposed hollow spaces and traces of burned organic matter. Not only salt, but material that had once lived. If fabricated, it was unbelievably complex. If natural, it was the most human-like ever found. The team argued about revealing their discovery. Once public, chaos would follow. Yet they knew hiding it wasn't possible, especially after what came next. A junior researcher introduced a portable imaging device and focused on what appeared to be a line within the salt. It wasn't random. It followed a repeated structure, resembling ancient cloth patterns. No pigment, no decoration, just a subtle impression sealed beneath crystal layers. If lab tests confirmed it, this would be the first known preserved textile linked to a Sodom-related site. That was when everything changed. This was no longer just an unusual rock on a hillside. It became a place of importance, a possible link between legend and physical proof. They weren't openly claiming Lot's wife, not yet. But inside their tent, someone quietly said, "If this is true, then the Bible wasn't just storytelling. It was documenting a moment." And everyone there, scientist or not, understood that something remarkable had been visible all along, waiting to be noticed. Lot's wife. It started as a whisper. A rumor passed through excavation circles and shared in encrypted emails. But once the footage leaked, there was no containing it. In grainy clips filmed under the harsh desert sun, a camera pans slowly over the figure embedded in the salt. The shape is unmistakable. A full human outline fused into the cliffside, arms partially raised, body slightly turned as if caught in the middle of motion. What the footage showed next shocked even the skeptics. Embedded in the salt near the torso were threads of mineralized fabric and what appeared to be hardened tissue sealed beneath crystalline layers. The footage was real. The analysis came next, and within days, headlines exploded across the world. They found Lot's wife. Archaeological evidence confirms the Bible again. In interviews, the lead researchers walked a tightrope. They spoke of anomalies, preservation, and probability. But off record, they admitted the truth. There was no other human figure like this anywhere in the region. The mineralization process, the body's pose, the proximity to ancient destruction zones, it all matched the biblical account with unnerving precision. Radiocarbon dating of nearby sediment placed the surrounding ash layer at roughly 3,700 years old. That's exactly the window many scholars associate with the destruction of Sodom. And then came the kicker. A lab in Jerusalem confirmed that embedded within the salt pillar were actual traces of collagen, a protein only found in animal and human tissue. It had fossilized under pressure and mineral saturation, an event that would have required extreme heat and a flash sealing process, something like an explosion but without fire damage to the outer surface. One scientist said in a televised interview, "This is disturbing. It's as if she was flash-preserved by an invisible wall of heat and minerals. Whatever happened here, it wasn't gradual." The biblical text is clear. Lot and his family were instructed to flee without turning back. But his wife did, and in that single moment, something irreversible happened. Until now, many saw that story as metaphor. But now, faced with physical evidence, a pillar in human form layered with preserved organic material matching an ancient destruction timeline, many began to wonder whether the story wasn't just a warning, but an actual record. Religious leaders called it the discovery of a generation. In a rare statement, a prominent rabbi in Jerusalem said, "It's not about proving faith. It's about recognizing that truth leaves traces, even in salt." Across the globe, theologians, historians, and archaeologists were scrambling to get access to the site. UNESCO issued a formal request for preservation oversight, while major universities offered grants for continued analysis. Not everyone was convinced, of course. Skeptics pointed out that natural salt formations can create bizarre shapes, and that, without direct skeletal confirmation, no claim could be definitive. But even among critics, there was acknowledgement. This pillar was unlike any other. It wasn't just the shape, it was the data buried inside it. And that data aligned far too neatly with a story over 3,000 years old. Meanwhile, the footage kept circulating. News outlets dubbed it the Salt Woman. Social media flooded with comparisons between the biblical verses and the real-world evidence. And as more photos emerged from the dig site, showing the excavation tent, the cautious brushing away of salt crystals, and the expressions of disbelief on the researchers' faces, the world watched in collective awe. Something had been found that defied easy explanation. Something shaped like a woman. something ancient, sealed in salt and silence. And whether one saw it as scientific anomaly or spiritual proof, the message rang loud and clear. They found Lot's wife. Archaeological evidence confirms the Bible again. And this time, it wasn't just words in a book. It was captured in actual footage, frozen in stone, staring back across the centuries. Shock waves across science and faith. The instant the discovery reached mainstream media, the narrative was no longer only about an ancient salt structure in the desert. It turned into a cultural earthquake, one that sent ripples through scientific institutions, religious communities, and ordinary households alike. News anchors struggled to find the right balance, caught between caution and wonder. Some labeled it the most striking biblical confirmation in recent history. Others argued it was careless speculation wrapped in dramatic headlines. But, regardless, no one could turn away. In the scientific community, reactions were divided. The geology was unquestionable. The formation was authentic. The organic matter embedded within had been verified by several independent laboratories, and the carbon dating indicated a timeline shockingly consistent with the biblical account of Sodom's destruction. Yet the interpretations drawn from that data ignited intense debate. Was this truly a human preserved in salt, or merely a geological anomaly strengthened by our hunger for meaning? Was it Lot's wife, or an instance of pattern recognition fueled by religious storytelling? Some researchers released statements calling for caution, warning against what they described as narrative-driven archaeology. Still, others quietly conceded that the evidence was hard to ignore. A professor of mineralogy at Oxford stated publicly, "Whether this is Lot's wife or not, this discovery is something the geological field has never recorded before. It deserves attention." Even among skeptics, there was recognition that something remarkable had been found, something that blurred the boundary between myth and material. At the same time, the faith community responded with an intensity unseen in decades. Churches, synagogues, and mosques referenced the story in sermons, pointing to the footage as a reminder of divine truth preserved within the earth itself. Pilgrims began arranging trips to the area, despite restricted access to the site. Some called it a miracle, others a warning, but nearly all agreed the implications were significant. Then came the theological debate. Was this evidence that every scriptural story held a literal truth beneath it? Or was it simply one of many mysteries kept by time, meant to remind us that some truths exist in layers, scientific, spiritual, historical, all together? Arguments erupted across talk shows, YouTube channels, and academic gatherings. Some claimed that chasing physical proof weakened the strength of faith. Others responded that the natural world had always carried divine marks, and this was simply one of the more visible ones. But as the excitement settled, a more troubling question began to emerge. If this was Lot's wife, if this was a real human fossilized in salt in the exact place and era described in the Bible, then what else could be real? What other stories might be rooted in actual events? Could other figures from Scripture also rest beneath centuries of sediment, waiting to be revealed? The implications were overwhelming. There were also practical consequences. Government agencies stepped in to control access to the site. The Israeli Antiquities Authority, already overextended, faced pressure from both sides, secular institutions demanding scientific control and religious groups demanding public access. Security tightened. Drone activity was restricted. A 3D scan of the pillar was approved, but no full excavation would move forward until the geopolitical tension eased. And throughout all of this, the original team, the quiet archaeologists who had stumbled upon the pillar, stayed mostly out of view. Their faces, once unknown, became objects of media attention. One of them eventually spoke at a press conference. When asked whether they truly believed they had found Lot's wife, the researcher paused and replied, "We found something that aligns with the story more closely than we imagined possible. Whether you call her Lot's wife is your choice. But something happened here, and it left a witness behind."